The concert in New Orleans was proceeding as always. Absolute precision, flawless orchestra, André Rieu smiling in the center of the stage, until in the middle of the fourth number, a child's voice cut through the sound of the violins. "Papa André, look at me!" The microphone caught the entire sentence. Several musicians instinctively stopped playing. In the audience, a boy of about 10, in a wheelchair, held up a sign with red letters. "Thank you, Papa André. Mom said you were my father." André blinked rapidly, as if trying to convince himself he hadn't read it correctly. Then he lowered his bow, turned slowly to the audience and said only, "Stop. Stop playing." The sound stopped abruptly. No applause, no sound. He walked down the steps from the stage alone, ignoring security people and cameras. The boy looked afraid. A man next to him, the adoptive father, tried to hide the sign, but it was too late. André knelt before the boy, really knelt, in silence. "Ethan, if I've done something wrong, no, forgive me." The boy began to cry. Jackson, André's son, ran to his father, confused. The maestro didn't answer, just remained there, kneeling, staring at that face that resembled his own, and raised questions he had never expected to hear in public. 4 hours before the concert, downtown New Orleans was abnormally quiet for a city accustomed to tourists. The stage in Jackson Square was already prepared, cameras testing angles, and André Rieu walked alone between the empty chairs. He always did this before a performance, the journey between sound and silence. Behind the scenes, the sound technician adjusted the monitor. A man with a hoarse voice asked if he could test the orchestra microphone. No one knew it was Daniel, Ethan's adoptive father. He wasn't there for work. He was there at the insistence of his own son. Ethan wanted to hear Live the music that his mother, Melody, played for him before bedtime, a piece that, according to her, was composed by André Rieu, but never released. Melody had passed away 2 years earlier, and the boy had been living between hospitals and memories ever since. The disease gave no more respite, and the doctor had been clear. It was a matter of weeks. Daniel knew this concert was his son's last wish. In the sound room, he held a yellowed envelope containing a folded score and an old photograph of Melody, smiling next to André, taken in the 90s during a tour. Ethan had seen the photo, read the inscription on the back, and immediately asked, "It's him, isn't it? He's my father." Daniel had never answered. He only promised to bring him to the concert. That afternoon, while the final adjustments were being made, André received a note delivered by an assistant. "There's a boy who says he's your son." He laughed, thinking it was an overzealous fan. He had no idea that within a few hours he would be kneeling before him. The note lay on the dressing room table for almost an hour before André decided to read it again. The paper was crumpled and the handwriting trembling. Just one line. "He just wants to hear his mother's music before it's too late." André looked in the mirror. The reflection showed a man accustomed to absolute control of orchestras, of applause, of everything. But that piece of paper took that control out of his hands. "Who delivered this?" he asked the assistant. "A technician. Said the boy is in the reserved area. He called you father." André let out a short, uncomfortable laugh. "Father? I barely remember the names of most musicians who have passed through my orchestra, but he knows the name of the piece. Said it's yours." André furrowed his brow. "Which piece?" "Love Without End." That answer made him stop. Love Without End. A title he had revealed to no one. A melody written almost 30 years ago and kept in a personal vault, never published, never played in public. How could a child know this? Behind the scenes, the activity was intense. The TV team adjusted cables, musicians tuned instruments, and the audience began to fill the seats in Jackson Square. André tried to concentrate, but the name Melody kept returning to his head, a young violinist he had met in Boston during a tour. She had a shy smile and a way of playing that left him speechless. A brief romance, nothing more, followed by a sudden disappearance, never heard from again. Jackson came in hastily. "Father, everything's ready to begin in 20 minutes. Jackson, there's a boy here. I want you to find out who he is." "A fan?" "I don't know, but he says his mother played a piece of mine that no one knows." Jackson frowned. "Do you want me to send him away?" "No. I want you to bring him to me after the second number." When the concert began, André tried to follow protocol. He greeted the audience, smiled, talked about the joy of playing at home, but his head wasn't following the speech. Between each note, he saw flashes of a woman holding a violin, laughing at something he had said, and the memory of the sound of that unfinished melody returned like an old echo. At the end of the second piece, Jackson appeared discreetly at the side of the stage and made a gesture with his head. André understood. He left the stage under the pretext of a technical adjustment. Behind the scenes, he found the boy. Ethan was smaller than he had expected. Intense blue eyes, bald head, a small oxygen line hanging beside the chair. Daniel, the adoptive father, stood nervously next to him. "Mr. Rieu, he just wanted to see you." "And why does he call me father?" The boy looked at him straight on without fear. "Because Mom said you were." Silence. André took a deep breath. "And your mother was Melody. Melody Carson." The name struck like a blow. André took a step back. Melody, the woman of the music, of the memory, of the absence. Ethan took a folded piece of paper from his pocket, a childish score scribbled with colored pencils. "She taught me to sing this melody, said it was your way of saying that love never ends." André held the paper with trembling hands. The melody was his, every note. Daniel tried to explain. "She never told me anything, just left this behind. When Ethan got sick, she asked me to promise that one day he would hear you play this piece." André didn't respond. He looked at the boy, at that fragile and familiar face, and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Guilt. Why exactly? He didn't know, but he was certain of one thing. That evening would not be like the others. Suddenly, he heard voices in the hallway. The door opened and Rebecca, the stage director, came in with a serious face. "André, we have a problem. The live broadcast is having technical difficulties. They're trying to fix it, but we need to inform the audience." "How long do we have?" 10 minutes at most." André looked at Ethan, then at Daniel, then at Rebecca. "Give me 5 minutes. I'm going back to the stage." "But the boy, he's coming with me." Rebecca's eyes widened. "André, that's not possible. This is a live performance for thousands of people. You can't just—" "Rebecca, trust me. For once, just trust me." He knelt again before Ethan. "Would you like to come with me to the stage?" The boy nodded, his eyes filling with hope. Daniel protested. "Mr. Rieu, he's very weak. I don't know if—" "I promise I'll take care of him, but this music, it deserves to be heard." Jackson appeared again, now with a worried face. "Father, what are you planning to do?" "Something I should have done 30 years ago." As they prepared to return to the stage, André heard a familiar sound, the soft hum of a violin being tuned. He turned and saw an old man in the corner of the dressing room, a violin in his hands. It was someone he never expected to see again. Marcus, his old friend from the conservatory, the man with whom he had broken off after a professional quarrel, the man whose contract he had accepted, which destroyed their friendship. "Marcus," whispered André in disbelief. The old man looked up, his eyes full of emotion. "I came for Ethan. Melody was my partner. This boy, he's my son." The world seemed to stand still. André felt his legs wobble. Everything now began to make sense. The music, the photo, the letter. Melody hadn't tried to present him as the father. She had tried to unite two broken men through music. "Why are you here?" asked André, his voice barely audible. "Because Ethan asked me to come. He wanted to see us both. And because Melody asked me to forgive you before she passed. Forgive me for what happened between us, for the contract, for the choices, for everything. She said music is greater than grudges." André felt tears welling up. He had avoided this moment for 30 years, and now it stood before him unavoidable and merciless. Ethan looked at both of them and said in a soft but firm voice, "Mom said you made the most beautiful music together. Why did you stop?" No one answered. The silence said enough. Rebecca came back into the dressing room. "André, we need to go now. The audience is waiting." André looked at Marcus, then at Ethan, then at the violin in the old man's hands. "Marcus, would you like to come with us to the stage?" Marcus's eyes widened in surprise. I haven't played for an audience in 20 years. "Then it's time." Jackson shook his head in disbelief. "Father, this is madness. You can't just change the entire program." "I'm not changing a program, Jackson. I'm restoring something that broke." As they prepared to go on stage, André felt a strange feeling of calm. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what he had to do. The music would speak where words failed. But as they walked into the hallway, he heard a sound that made him freeze. It was Ethan, who suddenly began to cough, his body shaking violently. Daniel ran to him, took his hand. "Ethan! Ethan! Breathe slowly!" The boy tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His face turned pale, his lips blue. André felt panic rising. Rebecca shouted for a doctor. Jackson ran off to get help. Marcus knelt beside his son, tears streaming down his face. "Not now, please, not now, not before he hears the music." André stood there, paralyzed, looking at the boy who a minute ago had been full of hope. Now he was fighting for every breath. The violin fell from his hands, and the sound echoed down the hallway like a final sob. And at that moment, André realized that some things cannot wait, that forgiveness has no time, that music has no tomorrow, only now. He picked up his violin, knelt beside Ethan, and began to play. Softly, tenderly, the melody of Love Without End. Marcus picked up his own violin and joined him, their sounds melting together in perfect harmony. Ethan's breathing began to stabilize. His eyes opened slowly, focused on the two men who were playing for him. A smile appeared on his lips. "Mom, I hear it. I hear you both." The music filled the hallway, and for a moment there was no audience, no cameras, no world outside that moment. There were only two old friends, a boy and a melody that had waited 30 years to be heard. When the piece ended, Ethan looked at André and then at Marcus. "Now I understand why Mom loved you both. You make whole music together." André felt his heart break and heal at the same time. He looked at Marcus, and for the first time in 30 years, they truly saw each other. "I'm sorry," whispered André. "I know," responded Marcus. "Me too." Rebecca appeared with a doctor, but Ethan shook his head. "I feel better. Can we go to the stage now?" Daniel looked at the doctor, who nodded carefully. "He's stable, but he needs to rest as soon as this is over." André stood up and extended his hand to Marcus. "Come, let's finish this together." Marcus took his hand, and together they walked to the stage, Ethan between them, carried by his father and the man who had loved his mother. The audience waited in tense silence, not knowing what had happened behind the scenes. When André walked onto the stage with Marcus and Ethan, a murmur arose. Cameras zoomed in. The live broadcast had been restored. André took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to see is not planned, but sometimes the best music is the one that cannot wait." He looked at Ethan, who was now smiling, and then at Marcus, who had his violin ready. "This piece is called Love Without End. It was written by two friends who lost each other. Tonight it will be played by two friends who found each other again." The audience held its breath. André and Marcus raised their violins. Ethan sat between them, his eyes closed, his hands resting on the armrests of his wheelchair, and then they began to play. The melody rose, sweet and melancholy, filling Jackson Square with a sound that no one would ever forget. It wasn't just music. It was forgiveness, reconciliation, love that had survived time and pain. Halfway through the piece, something remarkable happened. Ethan began to hum along softly, his voice weak but pure. André and Marcus looked at each other, tears in their eyes, and played louder, their instruments embracing the boy's voice. The audience stood up. Some were openly crying. Others held up their phones, capturing what felt like a miracle. When the last note died away, there was a moment of perfect silence. Then the applause broke loose, thundering, endless. André knelt before Ethan and whispered, "Your mother would be so proud." Ethan opened his eyes and smiled. "She's here. I feel her." Marcus placed his hand on André's shoulder. "Thank you for everything." "No," said André. "Thank you for forgiving." Jackson stood at the side of the stage, tears streaming down his face. Rebecca held her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed with emotion. Even the hardened technicians wiped their eyes. As André left the stage with Marcus and Ethan, he knew this was the moment that would define his entire career. Not the thousands of concerts, not the millions of albums sold, but this one evening when music did what nothing else could: heal hearts, build bridges, and make love triumph over time. And somewhere, he thought, melody was watching and smiling. The next morning, André woke up feeling as if he had dreamed, but the messages on his phone confirmed that everything had really happened. Hundreds of messages, thousands of reactions on social media, news articles in every major publication in America. André Rieu's most emotional concert ever. Maestro reunites with old friend on stage. Boy with terminal illness gets last wish. He turned off his phone and looked out the window of his hotel at the city of New Orleans, waking up in the morning sun. Somewhere out there was Ethan, probably still sleeping after the emotional exhaustion of the previous evening, and Marcus. After 30 years they had finally spoken, really spoken, without anger or reproach, just music between them. There was a knock at his door. It was Jackson, with coffee and a concerned look. "Father, we need to talk. About last night. About everything. The press wants interviews. The record company wants a recording of that piece. And Ethan's father, Daniel, called. He wants to speak with you." André took a sip of coffee. "What does Daniel want?" He didn't say, but he sounded urgent. An hour later, André sat in a small cafe in downtown New Orleans across from Daniel. The man looked tired, his eyes red from crying. "Mr. Rieu, I don't know how to thank you. Last night, it was more than I could have ever hoped for." "How is Ethan?" Daniel smiled weakly. "He talks about nothing else. For the first time in months, I saw him truly happy." "That's good to hear." Daniel hesitated, his fingers nervously fidgeting with a sugar packet. "There's something you should know." Something Melody asked me to tell you when the right moment came. André leaned forward. Tell me. Melody and I weren't married. We were partners, yes, but she always loved someone else. Marcus. I know that. No, you don't understand. Marcus and Melody were engaged. They were going to get married, but then something happened. Daniel took an old envelope from his bag and placed it on the table. This is Melody's diary. She asked me to give it to you when the time was right. André's hands trembled as he took the envelope. Inside was a small notebook, the pages yellowed by time. He opened it and began to read. The first page was dated 30 years ago, written in Melody's elegant handwriting. Today I saw André for the first time in months. He was different, more successful, more confident, but also colder. I could see that fame had changed him. Marcus said he had betrayed us, and maybe he's right, but I can't let go of the past. I can't forget the man he was before everything changed. André felt a knot in his stomach. He flipped further, reading fragments of Melody's thoughts, her struggle between love for Marcus and memories of André. Then, on a page halfway through, he read something that made him freeze. I'm pregnant. Marcus is so happy, but I'm afraid, not about becoming a mother, but about the secret I carry. The night before Marcus lost the contract, I was with André. It was weak of me, a mistake, but it happened. Now I don't know whose child I'm carrying. I can never tell Marcus this. It would destroy him. André dropped the notebook, his face pale. Daniel, do you mean? I don't know, said Daniel softly. Melody didn't know. She never did a test. She didn't want to know. She chose to believe Ethan was Marcus's son because that was easier. But why are you telling me this now? Because Ethan is dying, and because he has the right to know the truth. Melody wanted that, but she didn't have the courage. Now it's up to us. André stood up. His chair fell over. No, this isn't fair. You can't drop this on me after all these years. Mr. Rieu, I'm not saying you're his father. I'm saying you might be. And Ethan deserves to have both men in his life either way. André walked to the window of the cafe, his hands pressed against the glass. Outside, people walked by, unaware of the drama unfolding inside. Does Marcus know this? No. And I don't think we should tell him. Not now, it would cause too much pain. And Ethan? He must choose who he wants to see as a father, not based on blood, but on love. André turned around. This is insane. I can't. His phone rang. It was Rebecca. André, where are you? The press is outside the hotel. They want a statement about last night. Tell them I have no comment. They won't leave. And there's something else. Someone has uploaded an old video of you and Marcus 30 years ago, during your quarrel at the conservatory. It's going viral. André closed his eyes. Of course, the past always returned. I'm coming. He hung up and looked at Daniel. What do you expect me to do? What's right? What Melody would want? André left the cafe without saying anything more. His head was spinning with questions, doubts, fear. What if Ethan really was his son? What if not? Which truth was worse? Back at the hotel, Jackson waited for him with bad news. Father, Marcus is here. He wants to talk to you, and he doesn't look happy. André found Marcus in the lobby, standing by the window, his violin case in his hand. Marcus, I heard what Daniel told you, said Marcus, his voice flat but tense. I was at the cafe. I heard everything. André felt his heart sink. Marcus, I didn't know. I swear. I know that. But now we both know. And now I have to decide whether to get angry or... He stopped, his voice broke. Or accept that it doesn't matter. What do you mean? Ethan is my son. Not by blood, maybe, but by everything that counts. I was there when he was conceived, when he was born, when Melody held him in her arms, when he spoke his first word. Where were you? That's not fair. I didn't even know he existed. Exactly. And that's the difference between a father and a man who happens to share DNA. André was silent. Marcus was right. But still, he felt a longing, a need to know, to be sure. We could do a test, said André softly. No. Why not? Because it would break Ethan. He has two men who love him. Let's not take that joy away from him by forcing him to choose. But the truth, interrupted Marcus, is that love is more important than genetics. And if you don't understand that, you're not the man I thought you were. Marcus turned and walked away, his violin held firmly in his hand. André remained standing, alone in the lobby, surrounded by people but feeling lonelier than ever. That evening, André visited Ethan in the hospital. The boy lay in bed, surrounded by machines making soft beeping noises, but his face lit up when he saw André. Papa, André, you came. André's heart broke at hearing that word. Papa, a title he didn't deserve but longed for. How do you feel, Ethan? Tired, but happy. Last night was the best night of my life. André sat down beside the bed. Ethan, may I ask you something? Of course. Why did you call me Papa? You knew Marcus was your father. Ethan thought for a moment, his small fingers fidgeting with the blanket. Mom always said some people are dads by blood and others by choice. She said that you and Marcus were both dads, in different ways. And what do you think? I think I'm lucky. Most kids have one dad, I have two. André felt tears welling up. You're a wise boy. Mom always said that too. They sat in comfortable silence until Ethan began to fall asleep. André stayed for another hour, watching the boy breathe, wondering if those small lungs contained his own DNA. And for the first time in his life, he realized that it didn't matter. He was not Ethan's father by blood, but by choice. And that was enough. When he left the hospital, he found Marcus waiting outside, leaning against a wall. I thought you were angry with me, said André. I was. But then I thought that Melody would want us to be friends. For Ethan, friends? Or at least not enemies. André extended his hand. Marcus looked at it, then at André's face, and shook it. For Ethan, said André. For Ethan, repeated Marcus. As they stood there, two old men connected by a boy and a memory, it began to rain. Softly at first, then harder, but neither moved. They let the rain wash their faces, wash away their past, creating a new beginning. Inside, in his hospital bed, Ethan dreamed of violins and fathers, of music and love, and of a mother who smiled from above. The days that followed were a blur of emotion and uncertainty. André tried to resume his normal routine, but his thoughts kept returning to Ethan and the secret Melody had left behind. The diary lay on his nightstand, a constant reminder of the question that haunted him. Was he Ethan's biological father? Jackson noticed the change in his father. You're absent, father. What's happening? Nothing you would understand. Try me. André sighed and told him about the diary, about Melody's secret, about the possibility that Ethan could be his half-brother. Jackson's face turned pale. You mean I could have a brother? Maybe, or maybe not. We'll never know for certain unless we test. And are you going to do that? Marcus doesn't want to. He says it would hurt Ethan. But you want to know. Of course I want to. But what if the truth does more harm than good? Jackson leaned back in his chair, his fingers pressed against his temples. This is complex, father. But you must think of Ethan. What's best for him? That's the problem. I don't know. That same afternoon, André received a call from an unknown number. He hesitated, but answered. André Rieu speaking. Mr. Rieu, this is Dr. Thompson, Ethan's oncologist. We need to talk. André's heart sank. Is everything all right with Ethan? Not really. His condition is deteriorating. We estimate he has a week at most. The words hit André like a physical blow. A week, maybe less. Daniel asked if you would come. Ethan keeps asking for you. André ended the call and stared at his phone. A week. Ethan had only a week left. And here he was, struggling with questions about blood and fatherhood, while the only thing that mattered was time with a boy who needed him. He called Marcus immediately. Marcus, have you heard? Yes, I'm already on my way to the hospital. Me too. Maybe we should put our differences aside. I'm working on it. They met in the hallway of the hospital, both with violins in their hands. It was an unspoken agreement, as if they both knew that music was the only thing that could still comfort Ethan now. In the room, Ethan was awake, his face grey but his eyes still alert. Dads, he whispered, a weak smile on his lips. You came together. André and Marcus looked at each other, then at Ethan. Of course we came, said Marcus. We wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Will you play for me? What would you like to hear? Asked André. Love Without End. One more time. They set up their violins, sitting on either side of Ethan's bed, and then they began to play, soft and tender, the melody filling the room with warmth and love. Ethan closed his eyes and smiled. His breathing became calmer, his body relaxed. It was as if the music was carrying him to a better place, away from the pain and fear. Halfway through the piece, something remarkable happened. Ethan began to sing along, his voice weak but pure, speaking words that no one had ever heard before. Love knows no end. Even as bodies break, love lives forever, in the hearts it touches. André stopped playing, his eyes full of tears. Where did you learn those words? Mom sang them to me. She said you wrote them but never shared them. André looked at Marcus, who looked just as surprised. I never wrote down those words. I barely remember them. But Mom remembered, said Ethan. She said real music is never forgotten. It lives in us. They continued playing, now with Ethan's voice joining in, and it felt as if Melody herself was in the room, singing through her son, expressing her love for both men who had touched her life. When the piece ended, Ethan opened his eyes and looked from André to Marcus. Can you promise me something? Anything, said Marcus. Promise me you'll stay friends, that you won't lose each other again. André took Ethan's hand. We promise. And promise that you'll keep playing my music. so Mum knows I'm thinking of her. We will always play it, said Marcus, his voice breaking. Ethan smiled and closed his eyes again. Thank you, Dads, for everything. The next hours were a blur. Ethan's condition stabilized, and the doctors said he might have a few more days. André and Marcus took turns at his bedside, spending every hour with him, telling him stories, playing for him, just being with him. One evening, while André was sitting alone with Ethan, Daniel came in with an envelope. Mr. Rieu, there's one more thing Melody left behind. A letter, specifically for you. André took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it carefully. Inside was a single page dated a week before Melody passed away. Dear André, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and Ethan has probably found you. I hope you don't disappoint him. I know there are questions about fatherhood, about the past, about choices we made. But here is the only truth that matters. Ethan is a child of love, made in a moment of vulnerability and longing. Whether you are his biological father or Marcus, I don't know. And honestly, it doesn't matter. What matters is that he has two men who can love him, two men who can show him what real strength is, real kindness, real music. Forgive yourself for the past. Forgive Marcus. And show Ethan that love knows no boundaries, needs no blood, only choice. I loved you, André, and I loved Marcus. Different forms of love, but both real. Ethan is the best of us both. Take care of him. Take care of each other. With love, Melody. André dropped the letter, tears flowing freely down his cheeks. He looked at Ethan, sleeping peacefully, and felt something shift in his heart. It was no longer important who Ethan's biological father was. The only thing that mattered was that he was there now in this moment. He took Ethan's hand and whispered, I promise you, Melody. I promise. The next day, André and Marcus organized a small private concert in the hospital garden. They invited all the patients and staff members, and even some members of André's orchestra came to help. Ethan was brought outside in his wheelchair, a blanket over his legs. His face was grey, but his eyes shone with excitement. This is for you, said André, his hand on Ethan's shoulder. A concert just for you. The music began softly, André and Marcus playing together, their violins harmonizing perfectly. The orchestra gradually joined in, filling the garden with beautiful sound. Patients at windows watched, nurses stopped their work to listen, and family members openly cried at the beauty of the moment. But the most beautiful moment came when Ethan, gathering all his remaining strength, stood up from his wheelchair. André and Marcus lowered their violins, shocked. Ethan, what are you doing? Asked Daniel, running to him. I want to dance. Just once. I want to dance. André and Marcus looked at each other, then at the boy who was trembling on his legs, but refused to sit down. Then we'll play for you, said André, his voice full of emotion. They began again, a slow, beautiful waltz. Ethan moved slowly, his feet barely lifting from the ground, but it was dancing, pure, unadulterated joy. Daniel supported him, helped him turn, and for a moment, Ethan was no longer a sick boy. He was just a child, dancing to the music of the two men who loved him. When the piece ended, Ethan sank back into his wheelchair, exhausted but happy. That was perfect, he whispered, just as Mom described. That night, surrounded by André, Marcus, Daniel, and Jackson, Ethan slipped away peacefully. His last words were simple. Tell Mum I heard the music, and that I love you all. And then he was gone, a smile still on his lips. The room fell into silence. André held one of Ethan's hands, Marcus the other. Daniel cried softly. Jackson stood in the corner, his face in his hands. No one spoke. There were no words for this loss, this pain, only silence, heavy and final. But then, soft and from nowhere, André began to play. The first notes of Love Without End, played on a violin he had left by the bed. Marcus joined him, and together they played for Ethan, a final serenade for a boy who had changed their lives. The nurses stood outside the door, listening. Other patients heard it through the walls, and somewhere in a place beyond this life, Melody heard it too and smiled, because music knows no end. It lives forever, in the hearts it touches. Ethan's funeral took place on a rainy morning in New Orleans. The small chapel was filled with people who had known the boy, loved him and admired him. André and Marcus sat side by side in the front row, their violins beside them, ready for a final performance. Daniel stood up to speak, his voice trembling but strong. Ethan was no ordinary child. He was light in a dark world. He taught me that family isn't just about blood, but about love, and he brought two broken men together in a way that only he could. He looked at André and Marcus. These two men were once friends, became enemies, and are now friends again through the pure love of a boy. That is Ethan's legacy. Not his illness, not his pain, but his ability to create love where there was bitterness. André felt tears stinging. He had lost so much in his life, but this loss felt different. It felt as if a part of him had gone with Ethan. When Daniel was finished, André and Marcus stood up and walked to the front. They picked up their violins and, without saying a word, began to play. Love Without End filled the chapel, each note saturated with grief and love. The attendees cried openly. Even those who hadn't known Ethan well felt the emotion. Halfway through the piece, Jackson joined them with his own violin. Then Rebecca, then other members of André's orchestra. One by one they came forward, their instruments forming a symphony of farewell. It wasn't a planned moment. It was spontaneous, pure, and exactly what Ethan would have wanted. When the last note died away, the chapel remained in silence. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if the world stood still for a moment to honor a boy who had touched it. Outside, after the service, André found Marcus standing alone under a tree, his violin still in his hand. "I can't believe he's gone," said Marcus softly. "Neither can I. You know, I always knew Ethan wasn't biologically my son. Melody told me a few months before she passed away." André turned quickly. "What? Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it didn't matter. I loved him as if he were my own flesh and blood, and I didn't want you to feel guilty. So, he was my son, maybe. Or maybe he was no one's and everyone's at the same time. But here's what I know. He loved us both, and that's enough." André felt something inside him break and heal at the same time. All that time, all those questions, and the answer was simple. Love needs no explanation. "Thank you," whispered André, "for sharing him with me. No, thank you, for coming back into my life. Ethan wanted that, and so did I." They embraced, two old men who shared a life and a loss, their violins between them. Weeks passed. André tried to return to his normal routine, but everything felt different. Concerts felt empty, applause meaningless. He had lost something he couldn't name, a connection he couldn't replace. One evening, while sitting alone in his studio, he found Melody's diary again. He flipped through the pages, read her words, felt her presence. On the last page, he found something he had missed before, a small note written in haste. "If you're reading this, André, know this. Ethan is our son, not by blood, not by law, but by music. He is made of notes and dreams, of harmony and hope. And he will always belong to both of us." André closed the diary and held it against his chest. For the first time since Ethan had passed away, he smiled. He picked up his violin and began to play. Love Without End, but this time with new notes, new variations. The piece evolved, grew, became something new while retaining its essence. The next day he called Marcus. "I want to give a concert in honor of Ethan." "When?" "In a month, in Jackson Square, where it all began. I'll be there." They worked together on the program, chose pieces that Ethan had loved, wrote new arrangements, spent hours in rehearsal. It was as if they were young men again at the conservatory, playing for the pure joy of it. Jackson was amazed at the transformation in his father. "You're different, father, lighter. Ethan taught me that life is short, too short to hold on to old pain. Do you ever think of him? Every day, every moment." The concert came quickly. Thousands of people filled Jackson Square, but this time there was also an empty chair on the stage, a violin lying on it. Ethan's violin, the small one he had played during his final days. André stepped forward and spoke into the microphone. "Tonight, we're not playing for applause or fame. We're playing for a boy who taught us that love is stronger than anything else. For Ethan." The audience applauded softly, respectfully. Then the music began, and it was as if Ethan himself was present, his spirit filling the square with joy and light. André and Marcus played together, their violins perfectly harmonized. The orchestra supported them, creating a sound that seemed to connect heaven and earth. Halfway through the concert, André stopped and picked up Ethan's small violin from the chair. He held it up to the audience. "This violin belonged to my son, not by blood, but by choice, and tonight he plays through me." He placed it under his chin and began to play, the small violin producing a higher, clearer sound than his own Stradivarius. It was as if Ethan's voice was sounding through the instrument, singing a song of love and farewell. The audience stood up, thousands of hands clapping in rhythm. Tears flowed freely, but they were not just of grief. They were also of joy, of memory, of celebration of a life that was too short, but infinitely meaningful. When the concert ended, André and Marcus embraced, their foreheads touching. "He would be proud," whispered Marcus. "Yes," André agreed, "he would be." Months passed after the tribute concert for Ethan. André's life went on, but there was a permanent change in him. He still played for thousands, traveled the world, but each concert now had a deeper meaning. Each note was a tribute to the boy who had taught him what was truly important. On a cold winter evening, André received a package in the mail. No sender, just his name and address. Curious, he opened it and found a small wooden box inside, decorated with engraved violins. Inside the box lay a USB drive and a letter. The letter was from Daniel. "Dear André, while cleaning out Ethan's things, I found this. He made it a few weeks before he passed away, when he was still feeling well enough to speak. He asked me to give it to you only after some time had passed, so you would have time to grieve. On the USB is a video. He wanted you and Marcus to watch it together. Sincerely, Daniel." André's hands trembled as he plugged the USB into his computer. He called Marcus immediately. "I've received something from Ethan. We need to watch it together." An hour later, Marcus sat beside him in his studio. They pressed play, and Ethan's face appeared on the screen. He looked weak, but his eyes still shone. "Hi, Dads," Ethan began with a small smile. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. But don't worry. I'm not sad. I had the best life a boy could wish for." He paused to catch his breath before continuing. "I want you to know that you're both my real dads. It doesn't matter whose blood flows through my veins. What matters is that you both loved me, both cared for me, both taught me what love really means." Tears streamed down André's and Marcus's faces as they watched. "Mom once told me that music is the language that transcends all other languages. It connects people who would otherwise be separated. And you two, you are living proof of that." Ethan picked up a small piece of paper, a drawn picture of 3 violins, each connected by musical notes. "I drew this for you, 3 violins. One for you, André, one for you, Marcus, and one for me. We are forever connected by music." He held the paper up to the camera, his smile wide despite his weakness. "I want you to promise that you'll never lose each other again, that you'll keep playing together, keep creating together, and keep my music alive." He paused again, his breathing heavier now. "There's one more thing. I've composed a melody. It's not perfect, but it's mine. I call it 3 Violins. The score is in the box. I'd like you to play it together whenever you miss me." Ethan looked straight into the camera, his eyes full of love and wisdom beyond his years. "Thank you for everything, for the music, for the love, for being my dads. I love you both, more than words can say." He smiled one last time. "Until we meet again, where the music never stops." The screen went black. André and Marcus sat in silence, tears flowing freely. No words were needed. Ethan had said what needed to be said. André opened the wooden box again, and indeed found a score, written in Ethan's trembling handwriting. The notes were simple but beautiful, a melody that was both joyful and melancholy. "Shall we try it?" asked Marcus, his voice thick with emotion. André nodded. They picked up their violins and began to play, bringing Ethan's composition to life. It was rough, unpolished, but it was perfect. It was Ethan, his soul translated into music. Halfway through the piece, they both felt something strange. It was as if a third violin was playing along, soft notes harmonizing with theirs. They looked at each other, both hearing it, both knowing it was impossible, but also knowing that Ethan's presence was tangible. They continued playing, the melody growing in complexity and beauty. When they finished, the room remained filled with a sense of peace, as if Ethan himself had come by to say that everything was all right. "He's here," whispered Marcus. "Always," André agreed. In the following months, André and Marcus worked together to perfect Ethan's composition. They added variations, extensions, but kept the core of what Ethan had created. It became a beautiful piece, full of emotion and meaning. They decided to perform it for the first time during a special concert in honor of Ethan's birthday. Jackson Square was again filled with thousands of people, but this time the atmosphere was different. It wasn't sad but celebratory. André stepped forward and spoke to the audience. "Tonight we play a special piece. It was composed by my son, Ethan, before he passed away. It's called 3 Violins, and it represents the bond between 3 people who found each other through music." He looked at Marcus. "But it also represents something greater. It represents how love overcomes all barriers, how music unites us, and how some bonds are never broken, even by death." The audience applauded softly. André and Marcus raised their violins, and then something remarkable happened. Jackson stepped forward with a third violin, Ethan's small violin. "May I play Ethan's part?" he asked. André felt his heart swell with pride and grief. He would have wanted that. They began to play 3 violins now instead of 2, creating a harmony that was breathtaking. The audience was enchanted, some crying, others smiling, all touched by the pure beauty of the moment. When the piece reached its climax, The audience spontaneously began to sing along, their voices creating a fourth layer of sound. It was as if the whole world came together to honor Ethan, to celebrate his legacy. As the final notes faded away, André looked up at the sky. He couldn't see Ethan, but he felt him as surely as he felt the violin in his hands. "Thank you, son," he whispered, "for everything." Marcus put his hand on André's shoulder. "He knows." "Yes," said André, "he knows." The concert ended, but the bond Ethan had created remained. André and Marcus continued to play together, their friendship stronger than ever. They gave regular concerts in honor of Ethan, each performance a reminder of the boy who had changed their lives. Jackson became a regular part of their collaborations, his talent growing under the guidance of both men. He called Marcus Uncle, a title Marcus wore with pride. Daniel stayed in touch, often attending concerts, his eyes always a bit misty but his smile broad. He had lost Ethan, but he had also found a family in André and Marcus, and every night before he went to sleep, André played one melody, Love Without End. It was his way of talking to Ethan, of letting him know he was never forgotten. On one particular evening, exactly a year after Ethan passed away, André and Marcus organized a small private concert in the garden where Ethan had last danced. They invited only close family and friends, an intimate gathering in remembrance. As they played, a rainbow appeared in the sky, its colors vivid against the gray clouds. Everyone stopped and looked, enchanted by the beauty. Daniel smiled through his tears. "That's Ethan. He's letting us know he's here." André and Marcus looked at each other and began to play again, now with renewed passion and joy. The rainbow remained, its light shining on the small gathering, a silent promise that love indeed has no end. When the concert ended, André and Marcus embraced, their violins still between them. "We did well," said Marcus. "No," corrected André. "He did well. He brought us here." "Home," added Marcus. "Yes, home." They stood there, two old friends united by a boy and a melody, and realized that this had always been the destination. Not fame, not wealth, but this: love, connection, family. Ethan had made it all possible. A 10-year-old boy, with an illness that destroyed his body but never his spirit. A boy who took two broken men and made them whole. A boy who proved that fatherhood isn't about blood, but about presence, about love, about choice. And as the rainbow slowly faded, everyone there could swear they heard a soft voice whispering on the wind, "Thank you, dads, for everything." The years that followed were filled with music. André and Marcus traveled the world, sharing their story, playing Ethan's music, touching lives wherever they went. They became ambassadors for adoption, for family beyond blood, for the power of forgiveness. They established a foundation in Ethan's name, funding music therapy for sick children, providing instruments to those who couldn't afford them, creating opportunities for young musicians. Jackson eventually took over André's orchestra, his vision fresh, but his respect for tradition deep. And every concert ended with 3 violins, a lasting tribute to the boy who had changed their lives. Daniel became a beloved figure in their community, his story of loss and reconciliation inspiring many. He wrote a book, 3 Violins, a story of love and music, which became a bestseller and touched countless families. And André finally found peace. The questions that once haunted him were no longer important. What mattered was that he had loved and been loved, that he had connected and been connected, that he was part of something greater than himself. At his final concert, years later, he said to the audience, "I've spent my entire life searching for the perfect melody, but it was a 10-year-old boy who taught me that the perfect melody isn't the one you play, but the one you live. And if you live with love, with forgiveness, with openness, then every note is perfect." He played Love Without End one last time, his fingers still skillful despite his age, and as the final note faded away, he smiled, knowing Ethan would be proud. Because in the end, we are not defined by the blood that flows through our veins, but by the love we share. And that love truly has no end. It continues from generation to generation, from heart to heart, from note to note, forever.